Hi, my name is Helen, and I'm going to be summarizing chapters 6 and 7 in Sidman's Coercion and its Fallout. And chapters 6 and 7 are both focused on escape. So, chapter 6, called Escape, discusses the effects of coercive practices identified as negative reinforcement and punishment and their effects on behavior. So, Sidman highlights how negative reinforcement and punishment often go hand in hand and can become a cycle. So, in negative reinforcement, we avoid or escape aversions, environments, tasks to make behavior more likely to happen in the future. An example of this is I wear a mask at work to escape the potential exposure to COVID when I'm not wearing a mask, so making it more likely for me to wear a mask in the future. Another example is to avoid going to the grocery store, I will order my groceries on Instacart. So negative reinforcement's being used because I am more likely to engage in the behavior of ordering my groceries online so I can go pick them up in my car and avoid that environment of the grocery store. So I'm also going to provide an example of that I've witnessed recently of an observation of potty training in a daycare. As we've learned, potty training can be an aversive environment and an aversive skill that can be challenging to learn. So there was a child in the class who was potty trained but had regressed and had increased accidents. So I observed how the daycare staff was using negative reinforcement and punishment, which may have influenced why the kid was having more accidents and less success in the potty. So I observed many coercive strategies being used as an attempt to coerce the child to use the bathroom, but were not successful. So, for example, when the child would wait on the potty, which would be a good behavior, staff would complain about how it was taking so long and which made the potty training environment aversive. So, making accidents more likely to happen in the future. So, that's an example of the negative reinforcement. So, if some of the punishing statements that I had observed were if you don't go in the potty, we're going to tell your mom. If you don't stop crying, you will go to timeout. And so we can see how, but when coercive strategies are used, um, it can be very limiting for the individual who those coercive strategies are being opposed upon. So Sidman notes how the use of negative reinforcement and punishment can become a cycle and affect the way we learn and interact with our world and society. So negative reinforcement and punishment can not only limit our behavioral repertoire, it can also increase anxieties, fears about new or novel situations and just the way we interact with others in our world. So when we use negative reinforcement with others, we may become the aversion. We may become adversive. So Sidman gives great real world examples of escape in the context of relationships that were pretty relatable. So he gives examples in marriages, partnerships, workplace and supervisor relationships, as well as family relationships. So he gives an example in marriage and partnerships, how one partner may use negative reinforcement or punishment techniques when nagging a spouse about doing this. You need to go get a job, clean up, etc., etc. And that individual who is um, receiving that negative reinforcement may look elsewhere for another relationship or escape that situation by spending time elsewhere or with another person. So he also gave great examples about how negative reinforcement and punishment can be used in the workplace and how that can increase turnover, as well as I think we can all maybe think of a workplace we may have worked at that may have used some of these coercive strategies with us, which had caused us to, go look elsewhere for another job. That is more supportive to our needs and you maybe use as positive reinforcement instead of the negative reinforcement um, to increase productivity. So chapter 7 is called Escape Routes, and it discusses two main categories of ways we escape. So Sidman describes tuning out and dropping out. So tuning out is exactly like it sounds, tuning out of something that we don't like or something that is aversive to us. So an example of this is I will choose to watch Netflix when I get home after a long day instead of the news. So I am tuning out of the crisis after crisis that we are experiencing in our everyday life in America right now. And I am tuning out, so I'm using the function of my behavior is escape because I am choosing to tune out from the news just for a little while to watch my Netflix. He also describes Let John Do It, which I also think is an escape route that is very common that we use all the time. So that is passing off responsibility or decision making to someone else. So we can kind of look at this example in like a micro and a macro context. So an example that has happened to me recently is a parent presents me with a problem that a child's having in the home, and I'm not really sure how to answer it. So I use escape and I say, um, I'm going to ask my BCBA about that and I will get back to you. So I am passing off the decision making to someone else. I'm escaping that and tuning out from that decision until I have more information and feel more confident that I can address the problem behavior in the right way. And on a macro level, just looking at policy and legislation, we see that often that's going to be pushed off for the next generation. Climate change legislation for reforms often pushed off. Wait for the next Congress to deal with it. Wait for it to be dealt with after the election. So we see that tuning out, passing off the responsibility on a larger context as well. So I wanted to point out a really important point that Sidman makes in the chapter. It's on page 290 about aggression and disruption being escape routes. So I worked as a crisis counselor and a special education teacher at a private day school. It was often called a behavior school for students who had been kicked out of the public school setting due to challenging behaviors that were often defined as aggressive and disruptive. So keeping that in mind, that aggression and disruption are often escape routes. So an example of this could be, a student starts to cry when you take out markers to practice spelling their name. So they're engaging in that crying, disruptive behavior when you take out the markers when it's time to do a task to attempt to escape that task. So one of the examples of escape that I had experienced working at the behavior school is SOL taking time. We would have students walk out of the school during an SOL test as a function of escape. So I'm not doing the SOL test. I'm going to walk out. I'm going to escape. So I do also want to point out that Sidman talks about dropping out as the second form of an escape route, and I think this is huge and something that is a huge societal problem that we have to tackle as practitioners. I strongly recommend everyone to research the school to prison pipeline, and which really shows the failures of our educational system and how punishment is used to remove disruptive students. I say that with quotes because they are most of the time when students are removed from school, it's for very minor infractions, and this also disproportionately affects children of color at much higher rates than white students. So I think this is a great example of dropping out that not only is the student is functioning the student for escape, it's also a function of the teachers. So, and they are escaping difficult problem behavior with students by, okay, you're writing, you're out of class. And this, I think, is just a great example that everyone should be aware of, and something that is a huge issue in our society. Um, okay, and so my discussion question for this week, is, what is an example of an escape route, either tuning out or dropping out, that you've experienced personally or professionally? And second, in ABA, getting caregivers and stakeholders involved with interventions can influence how new skills are acquired, maintained, and generalized in different environments. So, as a behavior analyst, how could you explain negative reinforcement and escape to a parent who has a child who elopes from virtual learning activities? What is one non-coercive strategy you could propose to the parent for this escape maintain behavior? Again, thank you guys for listening, and I'm looking forward to hearing your answers and discussion.